Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to to Brainstorm. It's our series of videos where we talk about prevalent mental health topics. My name is Chelsea Gambles, and I'm a counselor at SUU, and my pronouns are she, her.
And my name is Tyler Tatton. I'm one of the mental health support peers here at SUU. And just a reminder, like this channel is meant to be a resource for SU students, but also just for anybody else who may be interested in mental health topics, or anyone who is wanting to improve their own mental wellness. So if you haven't seen our previous videos, go ahead and check those out. There's a lot of videos about resources at SUU, but also some just educational ones around different topics in mental health. And we'll be continuing to release more of these videos. But today we're super excited. We're going to be talking about mental health and student veterans. And our guest speaker today is Merrill Jones. So I'm going to give him a second to introduce himself.
Yeah. All right. Hi, I'm Merrill Jones. I work at CAPS. I've been with SUU for a few years now. I guess the reason that people ask me about the veteran experience is because I was in the military for 10 years. I served with the Army. I joined at 17. As soon as I turned 17, my parents reluctantly allowed me to join. And I joined the National Guard, the local unit here in Cedar City. So then I was in, we were deployed several times, so I actually spent almost 3 years of my service on active duty. So I feel like I have a little bit to add to that conversation around that, as well as the National Guard experience, which is primarily what we see, I think, here on campus. In addition to that, my father served in Vietnam, and then he was in the National Guard for 20 years after that. He retired with the Army. And I have several nephews and a niece who are also in the military currently. And so we have I think a rich history and lots of different experiences, varied experiences across different generations. And so it's been really good for me to not only base it on my own experience and that of the members that I served with in our unit, but also across those generations. And so I think I have a little bit of idea. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I've also coordinated with the Veteran Resource Office here on campus as well a little bit. And so that's primarily, I think, relevant, at least to this conversation today.
Absolutely. And thank you for your service and your family. We look forward to learning from you today. And before we jump in, we want to give you one quick disclaimer, our viewers, not you, Merrill. So I guess two quick disclaimers. That's that, the views that we show on our channel are not necessarily the views of SUU or CRAPS or the peer program. So just keep that in mind. And also that our videos are not intended to take the place of any mental health resources that you're accessing. So make sure that if you're getting mental health counseling, that you're continuing to do that and that you're following the recommendations of your counselor. We will always be linking you to resources in our videos, and you can view the CAPS and peer websites for other resources. And you can reach out to those for additional services if you need them, but keep in mind that the channel is not intended to take the place of any of those. That's it. Let's jump in. Let's talk about veterans and SUU students and all of the things related to that.
So
start.
Sorry. So just kind of laying a foundation, a framework for this. So SUU has a pretty significant veteran population, especially for as small of a university as we are. According to the Veterans Resource Center and the staff there that I talked to, I found out that SUU actually has just a little bit less than 400 veterans who are students at SUU, and then about 500 students who are the dependents or military connected, which is that's a lot of students. That is a big chunk of our student body. So I think that's pretty cool that we have so many connected with the military here at SUU. But I guess, what are your kind of thoughts on that, Merrill, with how many we have and the resources we have available for them?
Yeah, I think I think it speaks to the interest that our community members have in serving our country and being a part of that system where we get to to be a part of something bigger than, maybe just what we've been exposed to or we've experienced here in Cedar City or perhaps even Southern Utah. And in fact, that history goes back so far. The Triple Deuce, the 222nd, has been around. I think it's been organized as that for 50 or 60 years, perhaps more. Before that, there was still the unit here, but it was just under another number designation. And it was here for another 40 or 50 years before that. And so there's a long history of the National Guard unit and the military having a presence here in Southern Utah. And so I think there's lots and lots of families who have that and who have served and who, or at least know, neighbors or friends who have also served. And so I think that's really neat. I think it's cool that our community is so involved and so invested in being a part of this thing, not just for Utah and Southern Utah, but also for our entire nation. And so I think it's a really cool thing that we can have that presence in our community. And I think it helps us. I think it helps us to be more open-minded and to see the bigger picture, especially when our service members are deployed overseas or in other countries and other cultures, and we get to serve them as well. And so, for me at least, that was one of the most rewarding aspects of my service, was being able to not only to get to meet other people, but also to serve among them and with them and for them as well.
Yeah, as you were talking, I found myself kind of trying to picture what it would be like to be a student both before and after deployment. I don't know if you can speak at all to that, but what it would be like to, I guess, be thinking about deployment before starting college and after, and I don't know what all of that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, it's a little bit different for everybody, but I think generally speaking, well, I think most service members are probably at least a little bit scared or wary or apprehensive about being deployed at any given time. For some reason, when I joined at 17, and I just had it in the back of my mind that at some point, I was going to end up on deployment somewhere. And I think I think that anybody who would come into the military thinking otherwise might be trying, I don't know, maybe deluding themselves. That's just kind of the mentality. And I think most people, when they join, they probably expect that. And so to some degree, I think we're a little bit in the mindset that, yeah, this is a likelihood. It's probably going to be my reality. And at the same time, what can I do to help myself with this, right? And so I think a lot of the people that I talk to, a lot of people I serve with, good friends of mine, because, we're a National Guard unit here and we're community members as much as we are students and military members. We kind of talk about those things, whether we're a drill talking about it, whether we're, doing homework together and talking about it, or just, sitting in the restaurant eating lunch together. These conversations come up and we have those conversations. So in that regard, I think we prepare ourselves pretty okay, but at the same time, I don't know that if you haven't done it before, there's not much you can really do to prepare yourself for that lived experience. So, and our unit, I think we did a really good job. I think we had leaders who were invested and who cared about us, and so they wanted us to learn what they felt like we needed to learn. And so I think we were trained as well as we could have prior to going over. One of the things that I think about in terms of like student adjustment or adjustment as a student, perhaps even like transitioning away from school and focusing on a deployment operation or the mission of the operation is exactly that. What is the mission? Our very first deployment, when I was in, we were deployed to go to Iraq with part of the Operation Desert Storm. Excuse me, Desert Storm was back in the 90s. We were part of the new operation in 2003, but we got bottlenecked in mobilization, and so they didn't have enough airplanes, resources to get our unit over there to be a part of that operation at the time. And so, but we trained for it. I mean, for months, several months, that was our mentality. We are going to a combat zone, and what are we going to do to protect ourselves and those around us? And so it's a very, I don't know, surreal. I mean, really is the only way that I can describe it. And then to have it changed on us right at the last minute where, okay, well, we're not going to Iraq now. We're just going to stay stateside and we're going to go help train our future leaders. And so that was still very meaningful work, I thought. I think I learned a lot, and I appreciated the opportunity to work with our future leaders in the military. And again, we're ROTC cadets. They're also college students, community members of their communities. And so I think it also trains them as community leaders as much as it does military leaders. So one of the other things that we will probably get to a little bit later in this conversation, but I'll mention it now, is what do we do personally? You know, as students, as veterans, as military members, what do we do personally to prepare ourselves? Some people, you know, maybe they reinvested themselves in valued relationships, or they maybe reinvested themselves in connections to people, to things, to ideas. Some people, you know, maybe they even reconnect themselves with religion or some kind of faith ideology. And then other people had several friends who had been dating and they decided they were just going to get married before they went on deployment. Worked out well for some of them, maybe not so well for others. And that's maybe something to kind of maybe think about as student veterans is that experience, like what's going to happen to these relationships that I have or don't have. And that, I think for a lot of us in the National Guard, where we are community members first, military members, maybe that's not a good way to say it, first or second, but we are also military members, as in addition to being community members, is those relationships are so important. They were important to everybody around me. I saw they were always trying to be connected to their family back home, to their friends back home, and to each other in the combat zone where we were at. So that's the thing to think about, is how to prepare yourself in that way. And then coming home was another transition that was challenging. And I would say that based on my experience and the exposure that I've had with other military members, demobilizing from an activation or a deployment is it's hard to come back to where, you know, life went on in our hometowns here in Cedar City. When we came back, everybody else continued living their lives. And it's almost as if there was a blip, a blank out in our lives for however long our deployment was. Even though we had those connections, we were aware of it up here in our brains, but the actual lived experience now, sometimes people had moved on. And I don't know that I was fully prepared for that. And I think there's a lot of other military members who may not know how to prepare themselves for that. But those are the type of conversations that we can have prior to, while we're on deployment, and as we come home. There's lots of really cool resources to help student veterans kind of navigate those changes and those transitions. And so, I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
And it brought up several more for me. I don't know if you want to jump in as well, Tyler, but I was just thinking, like, I can't even imagine. I hear so much about the regular adjustment to college, right? And then, and I keep thinking these parallels kind of like with an LDS mission, right? Like just, and not at all to say that they're the same, but just, you know, like coming back and then thinking about trying to there's already these normal adjustment challenges that students face when they're starting college again, or after a period of a break or whatever. But then to just think about adjusting back to, as you said, demobilization or just like regular life or however you want to say that. And then trying to be a student on top of that and all that adjustment. All the intersectionality of all of that, all the layers of that, it just seems really complicated, challenging.
It certainly can be. Some of us, maybe we transition a little bit better than others, but that adjustment I think it's challenging universally. I think that's a pretty uh, common experience among most military members when they come back from some kind of deployment. Because our skill set during deployment, or especially if we're in a combat zone, our skill set is very different than what we need as college students or as community members. And so, if we've got that heightened awareness, we're constantly checking, around, and that just kind of living with the idea that at any given point, my life is at risk. I'm in danger of being injured or worse. That mentality, it starts to become, I think for most of it starts to become just kind of the daily underlying drive or motivation in terms of how we manage our lives and how we direct what we do on a day-to-day basis. That's not well needed. And in fact, it's not, it doesn't really serve us that well for the most part when we come back into our homes with our families, into the classroom, on campus. And that can be a very difficult and scary thing, not only for those around us, but for us ourselves. What's the next loud sound that's going to drop me to the floor? If somebody drops their textbook or bangs their backpack against a chair next to me or something, I can't be sure of how I'm going to react to that. and when I react, I think it sometimes scares other people and they react with fear probably towards me. And I certainly don't want that. I don't need that. I want to be able to connect with my classmates. Thinking about that skill set as well, like most of us end up being a leader in one way or another when we're in some kind of combat zone or situation where we work with small teams, and each one of us essentially end up needing to be able to survey what's going on very quickly and make some decisions, not only for the good of ourselves, obviously, but for the good of the unit. And come into a classroom, I think most people look at us and think that we're just one other regular student trying to learn something. And so sometimes it's hard to come back into that environment, into that classroom setting, having come home from deployment, and realize that my life experience is different than the lived experience of most of the students here. There's not to say it's more important or that's more developed or anything like that, but it's different. And I think that sometimes other students might have a hard time with that. And so it can be challenging in that way as well, and also being that we're students and when we get deployed, we come back older as well. So not only have we have this different lived experience, but now we're older, we're more developed in that way, we're more mature. If we're coming back from deployment, we're 23, 24 years old, and most of our classmates perhaps are, 18, 19, or 20. What's important to us may look very different than what might be important to our classmates as well. And so it might even be hard to have those conversations with some of our classmates. Just like, oh yeah, you're still interested in those types of things when I'm ready to move forward with my life and, perhaps with more meaning, not maybe needing to experiment with different things as much as, some of the younger students who are coming in. There's some of those things that oftentimes feel a little bit challenging. And then obviously there are a fair number of people in our country and in our community who don't understand the military experience at all and may not even be supportive of that. And so that's challenging. I know that I've worked with a lot of students here on campus that find that they just don't feel acceptance or belonging in the campus community or within their classrooms and their classmates. And that can feel very alienating. And
Mhm.
so I think for those of us who are looking to that, we need to make sure that we connect with people who maybe do understand perhaps what we've gone through or have similar experiences. And that's, I think, where the Veterans Resource Office comes in. Very cool space. They've got a very casual space where you can just lounge and hang out, and you don't have to talk to people in there if you don't want to, or you can. And I think there's also, through the Veterans Resource Office here on campus, they have a lot of programmed activities to help veterans get connected with each other and to provide them opportunities to interact with each other. Um, and so I think that's a really cool thing as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that was
Yeah,
addressing your question or your idea there. And
that makes sense why having a space with other like-minded or similar lived experiences would be super important and useful.
yeah,
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about the some of the resources from the Veterans Resource Center in a minute, but before we do that, I just kind of want to ask, what in your from your point of view, Merrill, what can regulars, like students who have never experienced the military experience, what do you think they can do better to make it a more accepting space, to make veterans who have had that life experience feel more integrated into the SU community, or really into any community? What can we do better?
yeah. Thank you for that question. I think that's so important. I straight off the top of my head, one of the things that I hear probably more often than anything else is when when people find out that we're in the military, one of the first things they say is thank you for your service. That in and of itself is probably reasonable. It's probably okay. It probably doesn't offend too many of us. However, what I think a lot of people do is they follow up and then they start to ask very pointed or specific questions about combat experience. And a lot of those are probably not appropriate. Um, if we ask general questions like, hey, is that something you might ever be willing to talk about? Like if we're interested, and hopefully we're interested in because we want to know them as a person, not because we're simply curious about what, combat experience would be like. So I think that's the next point, is maybe checking ourselves, checking our intentions or motivations for having those questions or saying what we do. If we are genuinely interested, then I think most people would probably be okay with talking about their individual unique experience in their own way, or perhaps they won't. And I think we need to be respectful of that as well. But if we are going to do that and they're willing to talk about it, I think one of the things that's important is just to listen. Just listen. Um, there's so many times. I mean, and I fell into this trap. I made the mistake with my father. I was very interested in his experience, and I asked several questions that were pretty inappropriate when I was young. And I remember my brother getting upset with me sometimes. It's like, Merrill, you can't ask that to Dad. Like, it's like, oh, and it caused me to kind of take a step back and reflect on, oh, maybe that's a hard thing to talk about or to think about even for the veterans. And so um, I think, yeah, I mean, obviously we all have our own ideas and our opinions and our positions about different things, and that's probably not a very useful conversation to have in terms of like political ideologies or things like that, and especially as it comes to combat, war, and military service in general. But if we're gonna create a space that's safe for our veterans and make it more comfortable for them, we let them kind of guide that conversation. We need to let them uh, direct that dialogue. And so some veterans are very open to talking about their experiences, and other veterans are not. And I think if we can just be respectful around that, that's going to serve us the best as we try to interact with the students around us who may have that experience in their lives. Um, there are some general questions that might help keep the conversation going in a meaningful way. So if we want to ask about their branch of service, how long they were in the military, what their maybe to a lesser degree what their job in the military was, their MOS. Some people like to talk about it, and other people may not be able to talk about it, you know, depending on what their security level was. And so, there are some general questions that are probably okay, and especially in the student veteran context, you know, okay, so what is your experience like been at this university, you know, here at SUU? What's it been like for you to be a student here? And oftentimes those those military experiences, those service experiences will be a part of their experience here on campus. And so, and that's actually one of the things that might be useful in helping kind of draw them back into the SUU community and life on campus as a student, is to, it's like, yeah, let's talk about that experience. You know, how are you getting connected? You know, and so those are, I think those are more useful questions and ideas to talk about. But yeah, obviously there's some definite do nots. Don't ask about, you know, things like death. Basically, that can be very hard. Whether it's the military member committing some kind of act of violence toward others, or whether they or themselves were injured, or, you know, if they saw it, and, you know, unit members or their battle buddies, if you will. Usually not the right place for them to process those kinds of experiences in terms of like having that conversation in the rotunda, or, you know, the mall on campus, or any hallways or classrooms. So there's definitely some don'ts, and but there are a lot of things that we can talk about if it helps. So the other thing that I think sometimes student veterans, things that they run into, is difficulty navigating interactions with their professors and faculty members and instructors of their courses. And as classmates, we might be able to help them with that. You know, if we understand something lit differently, we could offer to, it's like, hey, you know, I understood the instructions this way. And just, you know, how did you understand the instructions, and make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page in terms of the expectations for a class, assignments, those kind of tasks. That can be useful because, I mean, again, going back to the idea that some student veterans, you know, they were in military or they were in leadership positions, and it feels almost, it can feel frustrating to try to navigate that interaction with professors, where the power differential is very different than what they may have experienced, you know, on their deployments. So, yeah, being able to help them navigate that, and to just be aware of different other offices outside of like the Veterans Resource Office, being aware of other resources on campus that might be useful to them, other organizations, groups, clubs even, that might be of interest to them. Helping them, again, helping student veterans connect. And so, yes, I think it's important to recognize their service and perhaps express appreciation for that. And then, to say, hey, is there anything I can do to help you? You know, just anything around campus, I'd like to, let me. Sometimes we probably need a little bit more directness when people approach us, because we learn to be fairly self-sufficient, independent. It's really easy to turn down offers for help, but if we're more persistent and perhaps more directive, student veterans might be more open to accepting those offers for assistance than they would if it was just a general question. So it's like, is there anything I can do to help? Or it's like, I'd like to help. Would it help if I did this? You know? And so obviously that's going to be different for each veteran, but it could be just as simple as like, hey, let me walk with you to the Veterans Resource Office. I'd like to get to, you know, see what's there more anyway, and so I can be a better advocate or ally in that way. And so, you know, I think that's pretty cool. Let's see.
Helpful.
I think that's probably good for that. Anything else that you had questions about, or did I miss anything that you were hoping for?
No, I think that really answered my question pretty well, and thank you. And try to remember all that.
Do we want to talk about other resources that are available to the students at this point?
Yeah, I think that's super great, yeah, direction to go now. In fact, I think Tyler, you mentioned that you had just checked in with the Veterans Resource Office, and they had maybe a small list of things that might be useful for some of the veterans.
Yeah, so I actually was able to go talk with some of the staff there, and just ask what are some of the resources that they would want us to highlight in this type of video, and because they have so many resources on a lot of different topics. And so just a few, after I explained the video and what we were going to be talking about, a few that they wanted us to highlight were, they actually, in the Veterans Resource Center, they have um, information on how to meet with veteran peer mentors. So they have two students who are veterans who they are employed as peer mentors for veterans. And these students are able to meet with veterans to talk about really anything that they want to talk about, whether it's something with a resource that they don't know how to get access to, um, or if it's they want to talk about a struggle that they're having adjusting to being a student. It seemed pretty broad, and they seemed like they were pretty excited about this resource in the Veterans Resource Center. And they have flyers around the Veterans Resource Center with the information on how to contact either of these students. So definitely check those out if that seems interesting to you. They also wanted me to highlight that for veterans who are enrolled in VA healthcare, they actually have access to free telehealth therapy. So, and you can access that in the Veterans Resource Center if that's what you want. So you, through the VA, you're able to do like basically a Skype call with therapists who are able to talk with you about whatever you need. And through the VA healthcare, that's free. And if you are a veteran and aren't enrolled in VA healthcare yet, they can help you with that in the Veterans Resource Center. And they have a lot of resources on their website as well, and tons of information on how to access each of those things. So that website is suu.edu/veterans affairs. So, and we will include a link to that as well in the description for this video. So please check that out. But one other resource we wanted to talk about that wasn't one necessarily affiliated with SUU and our resource center is this cool website called maketheconnection.net. And the focus of this website is to reduce the stigma around mental health services in the military, because the military experience is hard. Life is hard. But there's a lot of stigma both inside the military and outside the military about mental health and asking for help. And this website is really cool because it is focused on reducing that stigma and making it a normal thing to ask for the help you need. And includes a lot of stories from veterans explaining the struggles that they've had and talking about their experience and getting help and how helpful it was for them. And I just think that it's super awesome and very brave of those individuals who have shared their stories to share what they've been through and how they've gotten help. And that's what we want for everybody, to be able to access the resources they need and get the help you need and live a fulfilling life. So
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tyler. Thank you for making that comment around the Make the Connection website. I agree. it seems like a very useful resource for veterans and student veterans in terms of just normalizing your experience. Like, what you're going through it doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean that, you're doing anything wrong. It just means that, yeah, life, you've had some challenges and some experiences that perhaps are difficult to sort through and to organize and make sense of. And so that website, along with the Veterans Resource Office and the things that they offer there, can be very useful. Obviously, the Veterans Resource Center also helps with access GI Bill monies, tuition assistance, things like that. But they also can help make those connections in terms of things like what you're talking about, the telehealth through the VA, and so usually, yeah, that's with a therapist or a counselor who is very familiar with military lingo, with military experiences, and so that might be more comfortable for some veterans students who might feel more comfortable talking about their experiences to somebody who can talk around that and understand what's going on there. Also, it's SUU CAPS. Obviously, we have a few counselors there who have some military experience, and so we invite you to come in and into our office as well if that's something that feels okay. Certainly, we don't want to compete with the VA telehealth program through the VRC, but also it's just another resource. And so wherever you feel most comfortable, please check into wherever it is that makes sense for you. And I like the idea of going back to that Make the Connection website, because I think that's what it's really about, is making connections, feeling like there's somebody who understands, knowing that, having those conversations and those interactions with people who can relate with what we're going through as veterans. So again, through the Veterans Resource Center, there's also things like that people can connect with, like the Student Veterans of America group. So that can be useful, just to have another place to talk and to help advocate for other veterans as well, especially as college students across America. Yeah, so I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for having me today. I'm not in charge here, so I'm not trying to end things right now, but I just wondered if there's anything else, yeah, we can do that as well.
I didn't want to put you on the spot, Merrill, but I wanted to just kind of piggyback on your comment about coming into CAPS. For students that don't know, when they fill out the paperwork and they mark veteran status, when we meet and we disperse clients, or when our clinical director assigns a counselor, they keep that in mind, the veteran status, and they assign a counselor based on like what would feel like the best fit. And I didn't want to put you on the spot in that, but you often see veterans in our office, right, Merrill? And you're open to that. And so people could even
yes, absolutely,
ask you or say that they want to see someone with experience in military or with experience in seeing veterans, if that would help make them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Cool. I was like thinking I could delete this part if he's like, no, I don't necessarily. But I knew that you do. The point is, if it does feel good for you to come to CAPS, like Merrill said, keep in mind that we do assign people based on what they're presenting with and their demographics, and that's something that is important and that we consider. And now you have one familiar face, and as Merrill mentioned, we do have at least one other counselor on staff that has some experience as well, and it's something that we are conscious of, and I'm grateful that we have people who can meet those needs. And I've learned a ton today, so thank you so much for that.
And just another reminder that the resources at CAPS are also free to students, so that is another option. But yeah, I agree with Chelsea. I feel like I have learned a lot today, so thank you so much, Merrill, for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, even if one veteran hears this and maybe or a military family maybe learned a little bit about the resources, and or hopefully a T-Bird gets a little bit of insight about how to interact more safely or more compassionately around veterans, I think it's hugely important, and I know it's helped me, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll link the resources mentioned. And what else do we need to sign off with, Tyler?
Have a good one, T-Birds, and don't forget to check out our other videos.
Thanks, everybody.